Would you date yourself? Sit with that question for a minute, because what nobody tells you is that in order to build real connections with other people, you need to build one with yourself. In this video, I'm going to talk about what human connection is really about and how we actually become ourselves first before we can connect with others. And take a coffee for this one because it's going to be for about 10 minutes. I used to overthink conversations and think that I had to prove something. Actually, I used to perform in the conversations. So what that looks like is I would have scripted ideas, what I wanted to say. I made sure that I was likable. I made sure that I was listening, except I didn't always listen because I was very impulsive. So I understood very quickly, growing up in New York City, that being able to connect with others was about survival. It was really about performing and making sure that you were loud and heard. Working with executives and engineers and project managers and entrepreneurs specifically in the last 10 years, what we've learned to understand is that we need to shed the performance, the identity, in order to understand who we really are so that we can start connecting from our true selves. Now, you may say, okay, well, that is extremely difficult and I don't want to do that. Of course you don't want to take off your mask, and of course, what would happen if you could actually stop performing? Well, you have to sit with yourself. Then you could answer that question, would you date yourself? Because most of you probably wouldn't, including myself. So I'm going to talk about the mistakes, the journeys, and what really this is about when it comes to human connection. The mistake in the human connection is that we think that just by asking questions and just by talking to people that we can get that human connection. Well, what do you think? Well, you're probably thinking, I need to communicate better. I need to sign up with a communication coach. Maybe I need to become better at articulation and pronunciation and dress better and be better. Again, that's back to performance. Well, that's the mistake that we make. The connection comes from being vulnerable and honest and from the heart, no matter the context, whether it's the relationship, the business meeting, because when you stand in your truth, that speaks louder. Your energy of that truth speaks louder than words, than any performance. The problem becomes with the human connection is that, okay, we don't trust people anymore, and then we don't trust ourselves. So we don't trust ourselves that we're going to be okay enough to just show up, like just to be present. So again, we go back to performing and wanting to be liked versus this is who we are and this is what we're going to do. So understand that the social environment is like going into the bull ring and fighting the bull. You know, I'm in Spain and then like you're holding the red flag and you're like, the bull's coming at me here, and then somebody on the street is here, and in New York, and then my boss is talking to me, and then you become reactive. The problem is that you can never control the communication, you can never direct the communication, you can never influence the human connection. And influencing, of course, in the marketing books is all about NLP, speaking to the person's interests. It is about building rapport and all of these sales tactics, which are great and they do work, except people make decisions based on the connection. In my school community, we're going to be doing a lot of sales training and a lot of role play, and I'll prove it to you that we actually can learn all that we want, but we go back to the reptilian brain and say, like, are we connecting with this person? Is this person, do they feel safe? Do I like this person? Because you're not going to do business or go out with the person if you don't like them, even before they open their mouth, because 70% of communication is nonverbal. So the energy, we always talk about energy and spirituality, it's really about instinct. Do I feel motivated enough to stand in this person's presence? And that's a really important question. First, you have to answer that question to yourself. Am I motivated enough with myself to show up for this person? It's much easier to always point the finger at somebody else and then just say that people suck and close off and isolate. But what if you could be more of yourself and then attract the right type of people into your life? And that goes back to my next point, which is self-love. What I absolutely hate when we read and talk about self-love is we need to love ourselves. We need to accept ourselves. Well, if we don't love ourselves and accept ourselves, then how could we do that? Like, we need a bridge, a transition point to loving ourselves. Well, that is protecting our energy, speaking our truth, loving who we are with our mistakes and all of our faults. It is not affirmations. It is not going to the spa. It's actually learning how to say no. It's actually sitting with ourselves and where we suck and being okay with it. Because guess what? I always say there's a market for everything and there's a market for everyone. You might as well be more of who you are, and so you can attract to people that resonate with you. That's what I think. So what self-love actually isn't is pretending you're perfect, trying to be perfect. Self-love in the purest form is acceptance, and accepting the part of your journey that you're on. Not everybody's meant for you in this journey, but accepting, like sitting in the stage of life or in the stage of your being where you are in this moment, whether it's broke, whether it's being wealthy, whether it's being kind or an asshole, is just accepting that in this moment I'm an asshole. And I have will, I have a decision to make. I can make a decision. And there's divine light, then there's assistance from the universe, from God, that allows you to kind of move in that direction. Knowing that you're not permanently in that state. You could always change your state, internal state, and therefore you change your environment. Now, some of you may ask about, well, how do I do that if I can't regulate my nervous system? So you have social anxiety, and then it's really difficult to establish that human connection if you have that social anxiety. We all do it. Smart people do it, lazy people do it, boring people do it. We all freeze because that's some sort of trauma response, that's some sort of neurodivergency that you have. For example, I have ADHD, so I have a tough time with impulses and controlling those impulses, which is why I do yoga. I just came back from my yoga practice, and which is why I do breath work, because without breath work and regulating your nervous system, it's much harder to connect with yourself and with someone else. In addition to regulating your nervous system, what really helped me connect with others and establish that human connection, I wish somebody had told me this sooner, I learned this at 35, was a values exercise. Now, the values exercise is understanding where your values are. It's not just priorities, because priorities are the outcome of your values. So do you have a foundation? Since I didn't have a foundation for myself before the age of 35, it meant I couldn't really date myself, therefore sustainably date someone else, because I couldn't communicate my values. And that means also where your values are in the hierarchy. I've learned that service is a top value. Creativity, self-expression, transformation, personal development. These are all really high on my value hierarchy. But because I couldn't understand that, I was around people that didn't value that. And then I was always struggling. Instead of being around people that value that can support me and help me grow. So I definitely encourage you to write down your 5 values on a piece of paper and see how that goes. Because understanding your values is a form of self-respect and self-love. And then guess what? You can connect with other people around the value. I would like to understand where you are in your journey of human connection, because in the next episode, we're going to talk about why some people instantly connect right away, and then others struggle, and then that's 99% of us. And of course, as always, we end each episode with do the best that you can every day.